someone left a star comment on my last video. I don't get very many star comments, but I got a star comment where he basically changed the story I told to one that was a lot lesser, and then said it wouldn't have affected him. And I'm thinking, that's brilliant, that. It's like, if that hadn't happened and it'd have been different, there'd have been a different outcome. That's like, wow, if only I'd have thought of that myself. I could have gone back in time and changed it all, couldn't I? It's like, what a fucking strange comment to leave. Because you see, I'm just telling a story. It's like I'm way past those days. I'm way past 20 years ago. I'm way past 15. I'm way past 10. And it's like, I'm telling you a tale or two. And the thing is that I point to, and the thing is that I always point to, and the thing is that will never get picked up and never get traction, is to say, like, you know, those people who were right at the bottom, or have found themselves right at the bottom. Well, what's happened to us? Sometime in our life, the government has decided to turn us into a source of work, at the same time as radicalising a bunch of us. Strange old things, right? It's like, for years I used to, a good 2 or 3 years, don't speak to anyone, we've moved in different directions. He's gone, I don't know, he's got different ideas, but there were a guy who used to be friendly with him. We used to research stuff together. We used to go into all kinds of different things, and he was into all this ancient history. I like good likely, but I speak to him now, and it's like he thinks I've flipped sides, and I'm like, I'm like, well, yeah, I have. And it's like, because I know better, there's certain things I understood that you don't, and it's like you've got a bias, that anger in you stops you from like seeing. I'm falling out with him, but we don't speak because it's a matter of he gets triggered by things that trigger me, right? And he still does, and to me it's like, oh, this is part of the game now, so I have a different reaction to it. But he's someone who's found himself made redundant. And it's like, so what did you do, mate? It's like, well, he worked in a car factory over on Merseyside. Now, once upon a time, it's like they were the best jobs you could get. Go and work for like Ford, Vauxhall, one of these big plants around Ellesmere Portway. There used to be loads of car factories. Gone. Made redundant. Made redundant at the same time as thousands of other people in the same area as him, because they all worked at the same place, all worked at the same plant. So then finds himself out of work. Not so long later, finds himself divorced. Can't keep the household going, so she decides, it's time you went. So he's separated from his dog, his wife, being local to his own family. But saying that, it's like, truth could be said that he did well to get away from Merseyside. Moved away. So then once again finds himself on the bottom of the ladder, and it'd be a matter of, when push comes to shove, I did work in a car plant, but you look at what I actually did, and it was pretty specialised to what I was doing, and in the cold hard day, I know a lot about how things work, but I don't have a trade. Can't walk in and just say I'm a welder. Can't walk in and just say, oh, I'm a plumber, painter. No. So it's like, what's happened to him? It's like, well, he's an intelligent lad. So it's like, you go to the job centre and you're an intelligent lad. They're like this. They're like this. They're like this. Oh, you think you're clever, do you? Oh, not so smart, are you? They really don't care how you ended up in there. They set about immediately punishing you for having turned up. Immediately. Depending on who you're dealing with, but then there's never any continuity, and then you get moved around. And then you don't find a job because they live in a fantasy world. They say, oh, there's thousands of jobs now, machine, and you filter it, and you take away the ones that are fishing, that have been downloaded from the fucking internet and that aren't real jobs. So you run the filters, and it comes back. There's one job to apply for, and you apply for it, and they're like, you're not applying for enough jobs. Well, I've applied for the ones you've got here. I get email notification. No, you're not working hard enough. You're not trying hard enough. And it's like, do you know how hard it is to get work when you've been, basically when they've decided that you're too old, and when they've decided that you know too much to be useful? When you're trying to get yourself in, because you're trying to start again because you've been busted out one way or another. You've been busted out, so you're having to start again, and you've been busted out for no reason that was to do with you. You've been busted out because they've decided to shut down a car plant. You've been busted out because the company you work for ran out of money. It was mismanaged, but you didn't manage it. You find yourself busted out for that, and then you'll get to it as to where, that system at the bottom they've got. One of my tales I can tell about dealing with the job centres when you've found yourself out of work. One thing I can tell you. I applied to go and work there. I was actually signing on one day, and I applied to go and work there. They were advertising, were taking on. And the chap who interviewed me says, you'd be good working here, you could do this. But this job would do you. So it's only about really trying to be friendly. And he wasn't an arsehole, this guy. He was one who used to, he'd been in the same boat as you can tell. You could tell. And he was like, one of them who was like, between you and me, I know there's things that's fucking going on, but you know what I mean, we get it. But then you get others who thrive in this environment where they can just punish people. So it's a mixed experience, which makes it worse. But I applied to go and work for them. I had to go and sit a test. To the test, I just went on the train. And it was held in actually a theatre. Well, that's a good place to do it. It was like a theatre, what was the venue? Somewhere off Deansgate, but here at a theatre. It was like, it wasn't an office or anything like that. They'd booked actually an event venue, and there were loads of people there, and there were loads of desks. And I took a test, and it's like, what test did they give you, John? It's like, they gave me a test of my mathematical skills. It was a fairly decent test, but I do recall actually having managed to finish it. Maths test. Then there was an English comprehension test, and the basic, can you read and write? But there was a bit of a comprehension test, and then there was a Myers-Briggs personality test. Filled that in. My results on those tests have shifted over the last 20 years, actually. Back in them days, bearing in mind I was a dying man, right? I'd have come back something like an INTJ, like ruthless. My personality test. Why, John? Oh, well, you see, you thought you were a man who were dying, and then he got to the bottom of it as to where you're then desperate to survive. So, you end up being a more rat-like creature, a more desperate man. So your personality test actually would come up as to say, oh, this guy suits our needs. Why? This one really doesn't care about other people. get the job done. He'll lie for us. He'll do our dirty work. So I get this letter back. I wish I could find that. That letter is a cracker. I wish I could find it. And it's like I've moved house, so I think I've been through everything. But it's a matter of I tried my best to keep that in a safe place, and it's a matter of one day it may turn up with some old photographs or something. But I do have this letter from the Department of Work and Pensions saying, if you ever apply for another government job, just hand in this letter, where you can confirm that you sat our standard blah 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 government test and you scored 100%. That's a nice old thing. So I waited a fortnight and was given an interview, and then I thought I'd screwed up the interview because I ended up late for it, and that's a bad thing. And it was a matter of I couldn't find anywhere to park for one reason or another. I'd planned going to it and recognised, right, I'll suss out this car park. You get there, it's full, and it's like, now what? So I was in a situation like that where I ended up late, and I apologised, and the people interviewing were still there, and I apologised and explained the situation. It's like, you can have the best plan in the world to know where the nearest car park is, but when you get there and it's got a chain across it, and they took mercy on me because it's like they were in the same shit on the same day, in the same parking change. It affected their day as well, so they were understanding. They were like, you're not the first person to say that. And that makes sense. So we're all at ease. So I've got this then panel interview with 3 people from the Department of Work and Pensions, and these guys are like soft-hearted, kind-hearted, social justice warrior. We've got to do our best for the people type, caring types. So we like talking to the clergy. So these 3 guys interviewed me, and I had an interview with them, and it went as well as any interview I've ever had in my life. Let's just say that was a good interview. So, gets word off them about 10 days later, congratulations, you've got the job. Well, fucking hell, I'm going into semi-retirement. I'm going working for the government. I might be going working for the employment services. I might be someone who works in the job centre. But I won't be one of those twats, will I? So maybe not giving people a hard time might give them the encouragement they need to get the fucking morale up, to show themselves as being worth something, not being punished every week. And I sold that in my interview. I'm like, you punish people you've no need. When I was talking to those guys, it's like, you look at, how defeated you can feel in that place, and how much worse they can make it for you. All the threats. These guys who interview me are like, what's this guy on about? Really? It's like that? So they were getting feedback from me in my interview. And then they made telephone contact, and I spoke to the guy who was the boss of the interviewers, and he's like, no, you can do a job for us, you'll be all right. It's like, right, as soon as there's a vacancy in this place, this place, this place, this place, or this place, you're the first one who's going to start. I'm like, all right, okay, so it's like, so yes, you've got your offer of work in writing. Your start date is not yet confirmed. I'm like, okay. So I, at a moment's notice, within like 2 weeks' notice or something, they can call me up and say, you're coming working for us. So that puts me in a situation where I'm like on the job seekers, waiting to start working for those who administer the job seekers. So I goes to the job centre to sign on, and it's like, well, I've got a job. What? Yeah, I'm coming working here. What? Yeah, I'll show you the letter. It'd be disingenuous of me to be writing letters to all these employers saying I'm desperately keen for work when if I get a choice, I'm going to take the job here because its terms are pretty good. So unless a better job comes along, I'm going to come working here. Unacceptable. No. You should still be honouring the terms of your job seekers agreement and applying for X number of jobs a week. I'm like, yeah, well, that's dishonest, that's disingenuous. It's like if I'm wasting my time, I'm wasting somebody else's time. It says here that as soon as there's a vacancy here, I'm coming working here. That could be a week, that could be a month, that could be... So what happened was, from then on, every time I went to the job centre, I was sanctioned. From then on. What do you mean every time? It's like, you get sanctioned, so you're not getting any money for 2 weeks, usually, when they first do it to you. No, you're not looking... My crystal ball says you're not looking hard enough for work, and you're telling us this story that you're coming working here, and yeah, we've seen the letter and got the proof, but you've got this contract here that says you have to be doing this and this and this, and we don't care that you're coming working for us. That's irrelevant. And I'd just one after the next. Sanction. You go in, you get sanctioned, no money. You go back in, you say you're so sorry and tell them of all the fucking hardship you've had. The fact that they put you into debt with your landlords because you don't get any housing benefit when you're sanctioned, so you end up with a huge bill as well that you wouldn't have normally had. Your council tax benefit gets suspended, so you get a couple of full months council tax to pay. It's not, when they sanction you, it's not just they take your money away, you get it works out like a really, really hefty fine, and that fine is then collected by the council's debt collectors, and they're arseholes. I mean, like, they are arseholes. They're guys who shouldn't be allowed to deal with the general public, which is why they're bailiffs. They're dangerous fucking people. So all of a sudden you've got the bailiffs in your face acting hard with new laws that say they can use reasonable force. And you can't touch them, but they can use reasonable force. And it's like, oh, that's a fun old world to get dropped straight into, isn't it? So it's like, I was waiting to go and work for the government, and that wasn't good enough for them, and they set about then just systematically sanctioning me. Not looking hard enough for work. Oh, we're going through this again, are we? Excuse me? You know, I'm still on the waiting list to go start working for the Department of Work and Pensions. I'm still on the waiting list. Nothing ever happened. I got a job elsewhere. I went doing something different. I found myself a job. Oh, actually, someone found one for me and said, "Go ring up this guy, get an interview, go and work for him." Okay. So it's like in this window where I'm having all this trouble with the Department of Work and Pensions and the Job Centre. At the time, I was networking with people on the internet, on Facebook, who were in the same situation but in other parts of the country. And it's like, these people were not useless people. These people were skilled people, smart people, who'd been made redundant usually from really good jobs and stuff. And then found themselves up against them, and then going up against them. It's like the Joe Biden government, the Joe Biden thing that you see, where it's like deny at the bottom of the system, it works very similarly to what you see now on the big scale, like government, utter not giving a fuck, fail, make sure we win. Because I appealed them sanctions. I had one of them that was quashed on appeal when I wrote the letter. When I made the complaint, they registered the complaint because it was ridiculous, because I was due to start working for them. They upheld that, right? And then I went to a tribunal for the next one. And before the tribunal hearing, somebody rang up. I'm calling from the job centre in Rochdale, never mind my name. Don't you be thinking of turning up for that court tomorrow. We're going to humiliate you if you do. You'll never get over it. It'll be the worst thing that ever happened to you. We're going to make you look a fool in front of all those people, and you'll regret ever having turned up. I'm like, who is this? Never you mind who this is. Excuse me? So I get a threatening phone call from some woman from the job centre, and they didn't know that I'd entered my own evidence and they had to show me the case against me, and I'd already gone through it, and I'd actually already I had a killer piece of evidence that just destroyed their case, because they'd actually, sent it off to the shittest lawyers to make a case against me that they were right. And it was the shittest case ever by the shittest lawyers in the world, because it's like, this guy drives, all these driving jobs were on our system. He never applied for any of them. He's not looking for work hard enough. If he was serious about it, he would have applied for all these jobs. So I just rang up the court and says, hello, can I put some evidence into a tribunal? Yes, have you got a case number? Yes, it's this. It's, what is it? Document. It's like, can I fax it and see that it ends up placing as evidence? It's like, yeah, you can do that. Sends in my own evidence. What's my evidence? Photocopy of driving licence. All them jobs needed a clean licence or a maximum of 3 points, and I had 6, and they knew I had 6, and it was on their system that I had 6, but they weren't interested in being fair, so they omitted a piece of information. And in omitting a piece of information, right, they tried to pull the wool over the magistrate, or the guy who was the judge of the case of the. They tried to pull the wool over his eyes, and they didn't turn up. They promised me that I was going to go up against the lawyers, and they didn't turn up. So they were trying to bluff me, and they didn't know that I'd put evidence in. So as an open and shut case, I'd have lost if I hadn't turned up. So they were trying to get me not to turn up because they didn't fancy turning up, and they thought they'd won. So the tribunal against me turned out a fiasco. Because I'm like, they've just stitched me up. The case I make is they've deliberately stitched me up because they've omitted this piece of information that's really important here. They've got this piece of information and they've omitted it. And then he goes through for another file, and then he's able to get the information that they've got on me on the system as part of the file, and he goes like that. Yeah, you're right, you've got 6 points on your driving licence, it says here. And he says, yeah, you're right. He just goes that, you're right. And he's like, I'm going to look into this isn't good. It's like, and I'm like, so they've stitched me up. I went in a court like Ricky out of Trailer Park Boys. I wasn't like, Your Honour. I'm like, this is stitch up this, mate. I'm like, Ricky. Just goes and argues my case. And he said so. The guy says you said you made your case well. He says, yeah, well. I was like, I came out of it. Oh, you've won. So I won tribunal against him. For third one, right, I filled in the forms to appeal. And they just said they never received them. so there wasn't another tribunal. Because I'd have won again. It's like, they make no case. It's like, we just decided on the day, you're not trying hard enough. Here, fuck you, have that. Excuse me, you've got the power to do this. And it's like, yeah, they have, yeah. The people work for the government. They can fuck you right over. And it's like, everyone who's under the thumb, right, is being gaslit, systematically tortured, used as a source of work. So if you end up, hey, I'm having a problem here, there's too much pressure on me from you guys. Oh, so the next thing you know, oh, you've been to the doctors. They've opened an account with you then with the fucking prescription service, haven't they? They're selling you meds. Oh, you're feeling a bit depressed. Next thing you know, oh, you've changed services. You go into their system and you don't come out of it. It's like, it ends up all the way to you being in the ground or in prison, and they're still earning off you. They turn you into a source of work. The perverse incentives of government have made them ruthless, and this is 2010, I'm talking. They're predatory. They're predatory. This population of people I talk about as being like the ones ostensibly on the antidepressants, the mentally ill, those who can't work. They're like cattle, like property, and they're actually valuable. The sources of work. The sources of work for the local authorities, the sources of revenue for the councils, the sources of revenue. The government pays, somebody pays. It comes from the treasury, it comes from wherever, but somebody pays, somebody subsidises. And they're in business and they're all working. It's like the human zoo. It's like the plantation is real. It's like you'll never get, you know, you look at people who emerge on like YouTube, right? You get it, they'll come from that, but they'll never speak of it. They won't go up against that. They won't say, hey, you know, there's a plantation of perfectly useful people in and amongst the perfectly useless ones. The perfectly useless ones are gaming the system, and the ones who would like to contribute, who are just locked out and they've just decided, oh, fuck this guy, right? It's like, there's genuine victims of this system, loads of them, thousands of them, trapped one way or another in between the benefit system and work, in between, in limbo between, and just surviving and being broke endlessly, years and years of being broke. It's like, I don't linger down here on my own. It's like this situation as to where they've changed the rules that make it so those of us with experience find it much harder to get work by giving incentives to hire those that don't have any. It's like, this cunt's never done Anne's turn in his life, but if we take him on, we can get some kind of government bonus for being the happy people who realise this cunt can't get out of bed. It's like the box ticking game, just to go and work at fucking Asda, Tesco. Just make yourself busy, do something. They want your heart and soul. And you've got to be ready to sell your heart and soul to fucking Asda and Tesco to fill its shelves. They're wanting to run an indoctrination program. And if they don't think you're going to be receptive to it according to their psychometrics, you're not getting a job. It's like they want the thickest piece of shit there who thinks he's the smartest. That's who they're after. They're after the guy who can just be made feel content with a whistle and a happy tune and a four pack of Stella. That's what they want. That's what they're after. They don't want anyone thinking. They don't want anyone questioning. It's like the things they associate, right, with these are the kind of people we'd like to have working for us. We want resourceful and intelligent people. They don't. They'd never wanted that. They've got enough of that. They don't want that. My estimation, once you get past a certain age and you've still got something, they don't want it. And you could put it to them and say, look, it's like, you've degraded your workforce by freezing out. It's like half the people who are on the sick are depressed that they lost their fucking careers, that they lost the jobs, and they were then sent right down to the bottom. All familiar stories of where people have known who've ended up like having the last 25 years of their life on the sick, and it all come down to, oh well, when they shut the factory down. So you get these guys who've worked in places and they've got themselves in positions of reasonable seniority and then found themselves on the scrap heap, and then it's like, oh, old man, old fool, welcome to starting again from the fucking bottom. And if you like myself, that kind of shit has happened so often that I'm Mr. Start again from the bottom. Once you get past 30, they won't let you have another go. The only work I could get was doing the car delivery, driving and inspection stuff. You know why that is? Because they want experienced people with initiative, smart people. They want that. They're desperate for that. They cry out for people who can take the initiative, sort things out for themselves. They love that. They need that. But I mean, there's that much of it in excess, right? My old job of delivering vehicles still exists, but now people who've retired do it as a second job. As well, I've retired. I retired when I was 55, and I get £400 a week from my pension. Oh, you're 55, yes. So this job gets me out of the house, and just as a bump up on top, it pays for an extra holiday a year. You end up working with, they're all that now. Oh, no one who really needs to earn can do my old job anymore. That takes the wherewithal. Because there's a generation come into it that are older than I am, and quite a lot of them have got bus passes, so they can do the travel for free. So they want them. It went from being a job that anyone can do to really strictly a retired person's or an old man's job. And when the firms come to realise that they're better off with pensioners doing the job, and the retirement age going lower, they can get people who've retired doing the job. And I'm like, damn, it was going that way. There used to be a guy who worked with us, right, who was a retired rally driver. And he was about 60. And he lived like in Carlisle. And he used to do loads of runs between England and Scotland. But he was like the best person to work with if you were down where he was going as early as you could possibly be. So it's like if you wanted to do a job really super early where you arrive somewhere at like 5 a.m, you ring him up and say, where are you going to be? So he was brilliant to work with. And once we had a lad who had to pick up a transit van from Centre Parks, and Alan, he took it on. He's like, oh, this fucking place all over there, and he took it on like a rally driver. We were in what were it, something like a Fiat Uno, just a shit car. and he just ragged it right through the place. It was one of the funniest afternoons. It's like, oh shit, and I know this place. It's a red line in it in a little tiny crappy car. But him, he didn't need to work. He didn't need to work. It's like he was already from like a decent set of a decent family, a decent background. He'd been around the world doing this rally, and it's like, fucking hell, internet days, you'd struggle to find anything, but it's a matter of, oh yeah, it's like, if you made an effort to go and track down who he was, it's like, oh yeah, this guy was in the British Rally Championship, this guy took part in this race, this guy took part in that race. Saying that, there's a guy who drinks in my old local, which is shut down again because nobody wants to work for the guy who owns the pub. Guy was in he won the Rugby League World Cup. I'm like, oh, yeah. Some like little unassuming fella, friendly enough, right with everyone, yeah. And it's like, we got to see his medal for winning the Rugby League World Cup back in like the 60s. And it wasn't, because technology's changed. It's like, that's terrible. It's like, we've got better medals than that for winning football tournaments. And it's like, yeah, it looks like, we would say, it looks like a Subbuteo medal. But it's a matter of, well, that is a World Cup winners, world champions, real one. Oh, wow, what a thing. But there's loads of these folks who would get into my job, and they don't need the money. They do it because it gets them away from their wives, and it's just all income over the top. And for a second job that you can be flexible about if you really want to be, there's no better job for a guy who's 60 than my old job. So it's like, in that, I actually enjoyed doing that, and I probably do it to this day. I think I'm probably now might be getting a bit old for hours, but the reason why I'd have to work ridiculous hours is because of where I live. Where I live is not optimal for the best kind of work. Because whatever you do, you've got to come to the heartland. You've got to come right to the middle of the M62, whether you're setting off in the morning or coming home at night. It's like there's usually, well, very often, about 120 mile a day sometimes that you don't have to be doing to do the work just to get you home, because I live in a spot like this. So back when that job was actually better, I may have put out all kinds of feelers of trying to move to the Midlands to get better work, because it's a completely different job when you move to a different part of the country. Miles better. It's like, what a breeze. It's a breeze if you live in the Midlands, the car moving job. I'm like, when I was like round them areas, I were always keeping my eye open looking for places to see, is that place for sale, is that? But not an easy thing to facilitate. What we're talking about now, year-wise, talking in these terms, about 2009. Escaped from the clutches of the mental health GPs, the benefits people, being an absolute ball ache, employment agency type work, where you do 2 weeks here and you do a week there, and you do 2 weeks here and then you don't do nothing for a month, and then you do 2 weeks here and weeks there. Just years as that journeyman. Always start from scratch, start from scratch, start from scratch, start from scratch, new place. You know what it feels like to be an agency worker when you're like 34. And you turn up and you look like me, and it's like, well, what do you look like, John? And it's like, well, I look like a big thug who's likely, if he was to decide to freak out and start smashing the place, you wouldn't be able to stop. What? Yeah, it's like that has a price, you know. That casting a shadow for first impression. You get a lot of folk in life, you know. Who, you know, sometimes I have a bit of a dig at like midgets. Like, well, it's for fun because in the way that power dynamics work, certainly arbitrary power, is that when the little guy gets in power, I mean the little guy, I mean the guy who's 5'6", gets in power, and he gets to mouthing off, and you just realise that there's a little aspect of it is to say, you know, I know that you throw me through the fucking window, and they love it. It's like a guy like myself in a work environment, you actually find yourself getting bullied, and the way you get bullied is the way that abusive women bully, where they'll provoke you. Just provocation, provocation, provocation. Gotcha questions. Asking you the old, have you, you know, do you still beat your wife? Sort of question. And you'd be like, huh? It's like, you notice that. Bet you, just think of all the YouTubers. I bet you anything that he does a bit on the, he's fucking proper now, isn't he, that Charlie Veach? Now he's looking around Manchester. It's like, you see this shit he's looking at, this is the stuff I'm talking about. The underpinning of that system that enables that. But he's massive, him. He's like it looks like a fucking golf club, a big sort of medium build guy of about, he's about 6'6" or something. He's a big fucker. Right, bet you in his lifetime he's found himself being bullied, and that'd be a lot to do with why he does what he does. He's actually pretty good at standing against bullying. It's like he's played this game before, you can tell. It's like, oh, this one, we understand this one. Oh, this game, we understand this game. So to my mind, it's like he's another one who's one of these mixed bags, experienced people who's been, in some regards, again, discarded. Where it's like he could be making fortunes out in the world for some company for selling solar panels. It's like, why aren't, it's a weird one, you know, it's the sort of tech generation. The tech generation, when it's sort of taken over, they've discarded, like, just systematically discarded people who've got older skill sets that were more suited to a different world. So it's like, I've been designed to thrive in a world of telephones and letter writing and fucking speed typing. Because that's what they thought the world was when we were coming through. They had an inkling that it had all got towards computers, and the likes of me were ahead of the curve at that. I'll tell you, admin, that administration, I've said it before, 50%, like 50% of your workforce once upon a time. Not too long ago, and now nobody, don't need any of you. Just need someone to answer the phone and someone to answer the email, and that's it. Everything else taken care of by inputting numbers software. Firm doesn't need an accountant anymore. We've got a guy who collates all the information online, runs it that way. It's like the world's changed, and in changing, discarded loads of its workforce, just discarded them. And they've been discarded over certain lines. Anyone whose job has been replaced by a computer has been discarded. And what has the computer replaced? The system, the filing system, the accounts department, the sales team, all of it. every element you once needed for the betterment of good commerce, right? Gone and pretty much replaced by a computer or a poorly trained call center monkey in a different country. It's like the whole economy's been laid waste. How many people are scratching like I do were sorry, right, what would I bring in by way of revenue, by way of earnings? Works out about £90 a week. And it's like, so what do you do, John? It's like, well, I talk to people, I offer services. It's like I know a lot of shit, got a lot of experience of a lot of bad things. Understand a whole different side of what the world is and why there's a problem, why you've got a problem that's gonna like eat you. Why society's got a problem that will eat it. It's like you've savagely underestimated the underclass by way of how creative they can be and how disruptive they could be if they chose to be. The world doesn't seem to realise, right, that there are armies of people who are fucking stuck to the internet all day like me, because if they weren't doing that, they'd be doing something else. And they think the safest place for us is front of the internet, but it's like, but it's not, is it? I've sat in a job club where the dole make you go to a place where they lay on pens and paper and access to the internet like you haven't already got that, and give you help and advice, but mostly you just sit there and you have the crack talking about whatever's in the news. And I used to talk there with two guys who used to be in at the same time as me, who were in exactly the same situation as I was, but one of them was cracking on that he was illiterate. He reckoned that cracking on he was illiterate made it, he'd sussed out just be impossible to deal with. So he were cracking on he were illiterate to them, but to us, he were talking about his telescope set up in his attic. And let him roar with all his fucking lungs about with his enthusiasm for astronomy. And you got another fella who was like, he's a roofer, but he basically got a bit too old for it. He was about 55, 56, and it was a matter of bottle and gun to a certain degree, and it's like the cold days and the winters. It's like, can't do it no more. Well, what was his thing? Calculus. What? It's like, yeah, you like go to websites or buy books that have got problems in them and sit and work them out, and maybe sometimes take a few hours, and he gets engaged in it. I'm like, yeah, you're a useful person, aren't you? It's like, you're like real smart. You know, okay, you're in a pure maths for fun. And t'other fella is like all about lenses and understanding. No, fucking it comes around. It's like, see, like in a few months' time, you get yourself up there, even naked eye, you be sick, like one of them ones. And you're like, why are you guys here? And it's like, no one in the fucking world's ever going to give either of them to a job. It's like they were so smart they could bring them in and they say, have you never thought of? And they'd be like, the bosses there will be like, oh, Here we go. Someone who thinks he knows everything. Oh, here we go. It's like you ain't been through the metamorphosis of spending the best part of 20 years on the internet. And you don't know shit. It's like I can like reason you out of existence as to, you might do well to, who the fuck are you? Yeah. The world doesn't like assertive people. And it doesn't matter who you are. Anyone can be. They don't like it. They don't want it. They can't handle it. They're too emotionally weak to deal with it. They're afraid of it. The cold truth is that personally, it's like by way of, would you like to have a conversation about something big? It'd be a matter of, who are you to talk about anything? You're not an expert in anything. It's like, you're nobody. Yeah. You see, that's the thing, nobody with the power to open his mouth, with a platform, it can be anybody. There's massive risk involved, isn't there? It's like people like me who are like working class people who would like to blow the whistle on working class life, right? Realities as to where nobody's interested. No working class voices get anywhere. Those who hijack working class movements, they tend to exploit them to make money. There is no genuine working class voices. There's no genuine voices who are, in a meaningful way, speaking for people who've like found themselves in fucking benefit traps or more, so found themselves born in them. It's like, who speaks for them? And the answer is no one. And there's real reasons why people in those classes will always vote Labour. Well, because people of the right and Conservatives endlessly tell them they can do whatever they want and be anything they want to be, and tell them that they're lazy and need to get off their arse, when that's an absurd thing to say to someone who's been born in abject poverty. It's like, oh, so come again, excuse me. You're like, my father was a tyre fitter and my mother was a care assistant or something like that. You can be anything you want to be. It's like, do you see the school I went to? Have you any idea? It's like the kind of initiative that gets rewarded in the places where you came through was punished where I came through. It had to be protected. And when it wasn't, we've got a generation of people now just take the piss. And you give them more things to take the piss out of, and they'll take the piss out of them. There are those of us who don't take the piss, or take the piss a lot less than everyone else takes the piss. And it's like we're all tarred with the brush, all tarred with the same brush. Whole society, a great big fucking bribe. But it'd be a bribe for many on pain of death and starvation and being forced into crime. Forced in a crime. You lot who give it the old, oh, the young women who fall into the hands of these. Have you thought of how poor them girls were? As to where you could like draw them towards you with the price of a takeaway. Come on. There's an underclass of society that the government feeds off. and that the criminals feed off as well. No one gives a fuck about them. They just feed off them. They just make off them. Don't see anyone stepping forward addressing that. Don't, and still as yet not seeing enough people coming forward as to where it's a matter of, hey, you know, the psychologists who put me on these pills for the last 25 years, they may have just brainwashed me and given me a crutch. It's like, these people have got stories to tell, but it'd be like, but thing is that they never addressed their underlying issues. They were just tricked, so they would never really actually treated for what was wrong with them. It's like, how do we move to address this? And it's like, no one's even interested in thinking about it yet. Nobody, it's not dawned on anyone. There's too much going on in the world. There's too much distraction as to where it's like, we have brainwashed millions of our own people. Fuck them. They're all working class people. They're all poor people. Fuck them. If they'd have had private healthcare, none of it would have happened to any of them in the first place. It's their own fault. If they'd have been not spending their money on drink and drugs and cigarettes and Sky dishes and big televisions, they might have been able to afford private healthcare. Hey, you got a lot to learn.